The rejection in the Cathedral of Blood. She didn't scream when the vampire king rejected her. She didn't beg. She didn't even cry, not where anyone could see. Elowen Ashmeyer simply lowered herself to her knees on the crimson marble, hands folded like a prayer she no longer believed in, while the entire realm decided she was nothing. But in the far shadows beneath a column carved with ancient runes, someone else watched her like a secret. Lord Kaelin Nithrosin, rival vampire lord, sworn enemy of the Black Veil throne, tilted his head as if listening to a song only he could hear. Because while the court saw a weak girl from a dying house, Kaelin saw a spark. And sparks were dangerous in a kingdom built on darkness. The Cathedral of Blood was not a place for mercy. It was a place where history was written in silence and sealed with power. Once every century the vampire realm gathered here. Matriarchs with eyes like frozen moons, war captains in armor lacquered black, heirs wrapped in velvet and arrogance. The vaulted ceiling disappeared into shadows, and crimson sigils along the pillars pulsed like slow heartbeats, as if the building itself was alive. For the great houses, the crimson convocation was theater. For House Ashmeyer, it was survival. Elowen stood beneath the western archway, wearing the only gown her house still owned that could pretend to belong in a room like this. Emerald silk, embroidered with faded silver. Antique jewelry that had once been worn by a grandmother who had lived before their decline became a public joke. The hem had been mended so many times it carried its own map of shame. She kept her chin level anyway. Elowen had learned a long time ago that dignity was sometimes the only thing no one could steal, unless you handed it to them. Her hands were steady, though her heart wasn't. Not because she believed she belonged here. Because she had been told she must. If you refuse the convocation, her uncle had warned her, voice tight with fear, they'll erase us completely. We'll lose what little protection we still have. We'll be prey. So Elowen came. Quiet. Small. Invisible. She had built her life on invisibility. It was the safest way to exist in a court where the powerful hunted weakness for sport. Elowen's braid was pinned neatly, her posture composed, her eyes lowered in polite obedience, exactly as her late mother had taught her. Be still. Be quiet. Be useful. Never expect kindness. She was doing well. Until it happened. It wasn't a sound. It wasn't a touch. It was a presence, vast and sudden, like lightning ripping through her chest, splitting something inside her that she didn't even know existed. Elowen gasped, fingers flying to her sternum as warmth flared under her ribs, spreading through her veins in a pulse so bright it felt impossible inside a place built of cold. Her vision blurred, then sharpened, and the air itself seemed to tilt. A thread, golden and undeniable, wrapped around her soul and yanked. She looked up, startled, searching through the sea of pale faces, jewel-studded crowns and ceremonial armor. The bond. The blood bond. The sacred myth the great houses spoke about with equal worship and fear, because it wasn't chosen and it couldn't be bought. It happened only when fate itself decided. Elowen's breath caught as the thread pulled harder, guiding her gaze like a command. And then she saw him. King Morvain Blackell. The vampire king of Nightridge. Lord of the Black Veil throne. He stood near the central dais, surrounded by advisors and noble daughters dressed like weapons. His cloak was black and silver, trailing behind him like a shadow that had learned to wear royalty. His presence didn't simply fill space, it dominated it. He was beautiful in the terrifying way a blade was beautiful. And when the bond snapped fully into place, his eyes changed. Morvain's expression had been calm, cold, controlled, distant. Until his entire body went rigid, as if something ancient had stabbed straight through his discipline. He stopped speaking mid-sentence. Every muscle tightened. And for a single dangerous moment the king looked human. Not soft. Not kind. Just caught off guard. His obsidian eyes moved on their own, scanning the cathedral like a predator hunting the source of a threat. Then they locked onto Elowen beneath the western archway. The thread between them thrummed. Elowen's knees nearly buckled, not from fear but from the shock of it. Because in his gaze she felt something she had never received from anyone in the Black Veil court. Attention. Real attention. Not the cruel kind. Not the dismissive kind. But the kind that says, I see you. Her throat tightened. A foolish hope, fragile and glowing, rose inside her chest. The stories had always ended the same. The poor human girl is chosen. The powerful vampire protects her. Justice comes. Kindness is rewarded. Elowen didn't know why the bond had chosen her. But it had. And if fate had finally looked at her and said, you matter, maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to spend the rest of her life being invisible. Morvain started walking. The crowd parted without anyone daring to resist him. With every step, the bond pulled tighter, humming beneath Eloan's skin like a second heartbeat. What? The thought wasn't hers. It wasn't spoken. It was something older, something primal, rising from the bond itself, demanding recognition. Morvain approached, his face carved from ice, but Eloan could feel the tension behind it, the war inside him. He stopped close enough that she could see the faint silver flecks in his dark eyes. Close enough that the bond between them burned like a living thing. Eloan swallowed. "My king," she whispered, voice trembling despite her efforts. Morvain stared at her as if trying to solve a puzzle he hated. His gaze flicked over her gown. The faded embroidery. The tarnished silver. The careful mending. Then his eyes returned to her face, and for a heartbeat, just one, something in him softened. Something like pain. But it vanished so quickly Eloan wondered if she imagined it. Because when Morvain spoke, his voice was winter. "This is an error." Eloan blinked. What? He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The entire cathedral leaned in to listen. "The convocation rites could not have bound me to you," Morvain said, each word precise, clean, merciless. "This bond is wrong." Eloan felt the air leave her lungs. No, that wasn't possible. She could feel it. It was wrapped around her soul like a vow. "I felt it," she whispered, forcing courage into her shaking voice. "You did too. I know you did." Morvain's jaw tightened. He had felt it. He still did. The bond pulsed between them, pleading, demanding he honor it. But Morvain's gaze hardened like stone. "Feeling," he said, "does not mean accepting." The whispering began immediately, soft at first like the first sparks of a fire. "An Ashmeyer girl? I thought their house was nearly dead. That dress. How embarrassing." Eloan's cheeks burned, but she lifted her chin anyway. Because if this was her one moment of destiny, she would not shrink. Not now. Not when fate itself had finally chosen her. Morvain stepped closer, voice dropping, still audible, still sharp. "Look at yourself." Eloan's heart pounded. He wasn't just rejecting her. He was preparing to destroy her. Morvain's eyes swept over her again, slowly, deliberately, as if cataloging every flaw for the court to witness. "That gown belongs to another era," he said coldly. "You look like a relic someone forgot to bury." A few nobles laughed. Eloan's hands clenched, but she stayed standing. Morvain continued, words turning into blades. "Your house has no standing. No armies. No alliances worth mentioning. Your bloodline is so thin it barely qualifies as noble." Eloan's vision blurred with sudden tears, but she refused to let them fall. "Not here. Not in front of them." She forced her voice steady. "But the bond?" "The bond does not rule me," Morvain cut in, voice like frost over glass. "I rule myself." The court murmured approval. Power respected power. And Morvain was making a display of it. But Eloan could feel something else beneath his cruelty. A tremor. A hesitation. As if part of him was screaming to stop, and he was strangling that part with his own hands. Morvain's expression remained merciless. "Did you truly believe," he said softly, dangerously, "that I, King of Night Ridge, would accept someone like you at my side?" The question wasn't meant to be answered. It was meant to humiliate. Eloan's throat tightened. Because a part of her, small and wounded, had believed it. Not because she was arrogant. Because she had been desperate to matter. To be wanted. To be safe. The whispers grew louder. She would make him look weak. Destiny chooses badly sometimes. Poor thing. How naive. Eloan's legs trembled, but she held herself upright. Because she had survived worse than whispers. She had survived years of being treated like furniture in the Black Veil court. Years of being a ward with no protection. Years of learning that kindness could be punished. And still she had stayed kind. Still, she had offered a servant her last piece of bread when she was hungry. Still, she had helped a frightened stable boy hide bruises from a cruel overseer. Still, she had comforted a crying child in the kitchens when the nobles laughed upstairs. That was her power. And she wouldn't let them take it. Morvain turned slightly, gesturing toward the center of the hall where noble daughters stood like polished statues. "I require a consort worthy of the throne," he declared. "Someone strong. Someone politically astute. Someone who brings honor to the Black Veil name." His eyes returned to Eloan, cold and final. "You bring nothing but humiliation." The words hit like a slap. Eloan's breath caught. She felt something inside her crack. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly, like the last strand of hope snapping. Still she didn't collapse. She didn't scream. She stared at him, eyes shining with hurt, and whispered, "The bond is sacred." Morvain's gaze flickered. Just once. A fracture of something like regret. Then it sealed shut. "The rites were wrong," he said. "And I will correct them." Eloin's stomach dropped. She had heard stories of severance but only whispered. A king could sever a bond before witnesses, making rejection absolute. Irreversible. A public execution of destiny. Morvain turned away from her and faced the assembled realm. His voice rose, echoing through stone and shadow, heavy with ceremonial power. "I, King Morvain Blackil, invoke the rite of severance." Crimson sigils along the pillars flared brighter. The cathedral seemed to inhale. Eloin's heart pounded so hard it hurt. "No," she breathed. Morvain's tone remained brutally calm. "I reject Eloin Ashmeyer as my blood-bound consort." The bond screamed inside her, silent but violent. She felt it tearing. Like someone ripping a living thread from her ribs. Morvain continued without pause. "I declare her unworthy of the Black Veil throne." A noblewoman gasped, not in sympathy but in satisfaction. And then Morvain finished the sentence that would erase her from history. "I sever this bond before the Crimson Convocation as witness." For a heartbeat Eloin couldn't breathe. The world tilted. The crimson marble under her feet felt suddenly too far away. Her knees buckled. She sank down, slowly, quietly, onto the cold floor. Her hands landed on the stone, palms down as if grounding herself would stop the pain. But nothing stopped it. The ache in her chest was not only heartbreak. It was humiliation. Public, absolute, unforgivable. Eloin didn't cry. Not yet. Not until she could be alone. Because crying here would feed them. And she refused to be fed on. The cathedral's whispers swelled like a wave. She really thought she was chosen. Delusional. Ashmeyer should be grateful they weren't executed for the insult. Eloin's fingers curled against the marble. Her shoulders stayed straight. Her head stayed lifted. Even on her knees. Even broken. Even rejected by fate's own chosen king. Because if there was one thing Eloin Ashmeyer had learned in her miserable life, it was this. Sometimes survival is the loudest kind of strength. And while the court looked away, already bored of her suffering, Lord Caelan Nithrosin stepped out of the shadows. Not fully. Just enough for the torchlight to catch the silver ring in his iris, an unmistakable mark of House Nithrosin. A rival bloodline. A rival power. A rival destiny. His expression wasn't amused. It wasn't cruel. It was thoughtful. As if he was watching a door crack open in the world. And behind that door was something the Vampire King had been too blind, or too afraid, to recognize. Caelan's gaze settled on Eloin like a vow. Not possession. Not hunger. Recognition. Respect. And in that moment, while Eloin knelt in silence and the realm decided she was nothing, Lord Caelan decided something else. He decided she was important. He decided the king had made a mistake. And if Morvain Blackale refused fate, then Caelan Nithrosin would claim what the king had thrown away. Not to spite him. Not at first. But because Eloin's pain had awakened something ancient in Caelan's blood. Something he had buried for centuries. The desire to protect what others destroy. The desire to honor what others mock. And the desire to bring justice to a realm that had forgotten what kindness was worth. Eloin didn't know he was watching. She only knew the marble was cold beneath her knees. She only knew the bond had been ripped away in front of everyone. She only knew her life, whatever it had been, was over. But deep in the shadows, where rivals and monsters lived, a new fate was already moving. And this time, it was moving toward her. The rival lord's claim. Eloin Ashmeyer left Nightridge 3 hours before dawn. No guard stopped her. No servant offered a cloak. No noble bothered to look her way. She walked through the postern gate like a ghost being politely ignored, present but already erased. She carried only a worn leather satchel with 2 changes of clothing, a water skin, and a small dagger her mother had once pressed into her palm with trembling hands. "For the day kindness stops protecting you," her mother had said. Eloin hadn't understood then. She understood now. Behind her, the Black Veil Court was already rewriting history. Her name would vanish from registries by morning. Her chambers would be reassigned. Her stipend revoked. Even the servants who had quietly pitied her would be moved away like dust swept from a corner. Efficient, clinical, cruel. Eloin didn't cry as she crossed the outer grounds. She wouldn't give them that satisfaction. She had learned long ago that tears were currency in courts like this, and she had no wealth left to spend. But the moment the castle lights disappeared behind the trees, her breath shattered. She stopped on the dirt road, pressed a hand to her chest, and finally let the silence crack open. The place where the bond had lived still burned, as if her body couldn't accept the emptiness. She bent forward, quiet sobs shaking her shoulders, trying not to make noise even though no one was there to see. Because shame had become a habit. Even alone. Even free. Eloin didn't know that someone was following her. Not close. Not in the obvious way that guards tracked prey. In the subtle way storms followed the horizon. Lord Caelan Nithrosin moved through the darkness like he belonged to it. He wore no crown, no ceremonial cloak, no courtly mask. Only travel leathers and a black mantle fastened with a silver clasp shaped like a serpent biting its own tail. His eyes, winter storm gray with a ring of silver, never left Eloin's silhouette ahead. He didn't follow her like a hunter. He followed her like a man who had witnessed something wrong and decided it would not remain wrong. He could still hear the king's voice. Unworthy. Caelan's jaw tightened. Morvain Blackale had always been cold. That was why the realm feared him. That was why the realm respected him. But tonight, Caelan had seen something deeper than cold. He had seen fear. Not fear of Eloin. Fear of what she represented. A bond no king could control. A fate no throne could command. And Morvain had done what many powerful men did when confronted with something they couldn't own. He had destroyed it. Caelan's lips curved into something not quite a smile. Not amusement. Not cruelty. A promise. You made a mistake, Morvain. And I will make you watch it. Eloin's road turned wilder the farther she went. The trees grew dense, their branches twisting like ancient fingers. The dirt path became uneven, broken by roots and stones. The air changed, thicker, damp, heavy with old magic. Borderlands. Neutral territory. A place where runaway nobles disappeared and monsters lived comfortably. Eloin didn't stop. Her feet hurt, her throat burned, her heart felt like torn cloth, but she kept walking because survival was a muscle she had trained her entire life. When the sky began to lighten with the faintest hint of dawn, her body started to slow. Exhaustion sank into her bones, dragging at her limbs. She hadn't eaten since the convocation. She hadn't slept. And grief was heavier than hunger. She stumbled near a stream and sank onto the ground, back against a tree. Her hands trembled as she opened her satchel. 2 stale rolls. A strip of dried meat. Enough to keep her alive for one day. She stared at the food like it belonged to someone else. Then she heard it. A soft crunch of leaves behind her. Her whole body went rigid. In one motion, she grabbed the dagger from her satchel and spun, holding it out with shaking hands. Stay back, she snapped, voice hoarse. A figure stepped into the faint early light. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Vampire. But not wearing the crest of Night Ridge. His eyes caught the light, storm gray rimmed with silver. Eloin's breath caught. She recognized him. He had been in the cathedral. In the shadows. Watching. Lord Caelan Nithrosin. The rival vampire lord. The man House Blackale called traitor. The man the realm whispered about like a war rumor. Eloin's dagger wavered. What do you want? She demanded. Caelan didn't move closer. He lifted his hands slightly, not in surrender but in respect. I'm not here to hurt you, he said. Eloin laughed once, short and bitter. That's what they all say. Caelan's gaze sharpened. Then you've met the wrong people. The words were simple. But something in his tone made Eloin pause. Not tenderness. Not pity. Something steady. Eloin tightened her grip. If you're here to mock me, do it quickly. I've had enough humiliation for one lifetime. Caelan's jaw tightened as if her words hit him physically. I watched what happened, he said quietly. And it was wrong. Eloin's throat tightened. Wrong. No one had ever said that. Not in the court. Not when she was dismissed. Not when she was mocked. Not when she was used. Wrong meant someone believed she deserved better. Eloin's eyes burned again and she hated herself for it. She lifted her chin. What happened is the way the realm works. The powerful decide. The weak disappear. Caelan took one slow step forward, careful as if approaching a wounded animal. That's the way your realm has forced you to believe it works, he corrected. Eloin's dagger didn't lower, but her arm trembled now from exhaustion. Caelan stopped again, giving her space. I'm not asking you to trust me, he said. I'm asking you to listen. Eloin's breath shook. Why? She whispered. Why would you care what happens to me? Caelan's eyes held hers. And in that gaze Eloin felt something strange. Not hunger. Not entitlement. Recognition. as if he saw the whole bruised shape of her life and didn't look away. Because Morvain Blackale rejected a sacred bond in front of the realm, Kaelin said. And everyone applauded him like cruelty was strength. Eloin flinched at Morvain's name. Kaelin's voice sharpened, not angry at her, angry at the memory. And because you knelt in silence, refusing to beg. You held your dignity while they tried to grind it into the floor. Eloin's throat tightened. Her voice came out smaller. Dignity didn't save me. Kaelin's expression darkened. No, he agreed softly. But it revealed you. Eloin stared at him, confused despite herself. Kaelin reached into his cloak slowly, deliberately. Eloin's dagger snapped upward. Kaelin paused instantly. Easy. He pulled his hand out, not with a weapon. With a small vial of crimson liquid. Blood. Eloin stiffened. Kaelin held it out at arm's length. Drink. You're starving. Eloin's stomach turned. I'm not your pet, she hissed. Kaelin's eyes flashed. Not with anger, something fiercer. Respect. That's exactly why I'm offering, he said. Not forcing. Eloin hesitated. Vampires rarely offered anything without a price. Especially rival lords. Kaelin watched her warily. It's from my own vein. Cling. No binding. No oath. Eloin's fingers tightened around the dagger. How do I know you're not lying? Kaelin's mouth twitched slightly, humorless. You don't. Eloin's eyes narrowed. Kaelin continued, voice calm. But you do know this, I could have taken you already if I wanted. I followed you for miles. If I meant harm, you'd be bleeding in the dirt. Eloin swallowed, pulse racing. He was right. And that terrified her. Kaelin softened his tone. I don't want you harmed, Eloin Ashmeyer. Eloin froze. Her name. He spoke it like it mattered. Not like a joke. Not like a stain. Eloin's dagger lowered a fraction, without her realizing. Kaelin set the vial on a rock near her and stepped back. Decide in your own time, he said. Eloin stared at the vial. Her body shook from hunger. Her pride screamed. But her survival instinct was louder. She stepped forward, snatched the vial and drank. Warmth spread through her instantly, not the violent burning of forced feeding, but something controlled, almost gentle. Her vision sharpened. Her shaking eased. Eloin exhaled, stunned. Kaelin watched silently, like a guard who didn't need applause. When she finished, Eloin wiped her mouth and glared at him like it was safer than gratitude. Now what? She demanded. Kaelin's gaze lifted toward the rising sun, faint light seeping through the trees. Now, he said, you stop running like you're guilty. Eloin's heart pounded. I am guilty. I dared to believe. Kaelin's eyes snapped back to her. No, he said, voice low. Your only crime was being kind in a realm that profits from cruelty. The words hit Eloin like a blow. Kind. Her entire life she'd been told kindness made her weak. That kindness was foolish. That kindness got people hurt. Kaelin stepped closer, still not invading her space, but close enough that she could see the truth in his expression. I can offer you sanctuary, he said. In Nithrosan territory. Eloin stiffened. Sanctuary was not a word vampires offered lightly. What would you want in return? She asked, suspicion sharp. Kaelin's gaze didn't flinch. Nothing you don't choose, he said. Eloin's eyes narrowed. That sounds like a lie. Kaelin exhaled slowly as if patience was a practiced skill. I want you alive, he said. I want you safe. And yes, his voice dipped, controlled. I want the realm to witness what Morvain Blackale threw away. Eloin's stomach twisted. So this is revenge, she whispered. Kaelin's eyes flashed. It started as anger, he admitted. Because I hate watching power crush innocence. He took a step back again, giving her room to breathe. But then I watched you, he continued. And I realized something. Eloin swallowed. What? Kaelin's voice softened, not romantic, not sweet, but honest. You didn't break. Eloin's throat tightened again. Kaelin's expression was steady. Most would have screamed. Pleaded. Tried to barter their dignity for survival. He paused. But you knelt in silence and kept your chin lifted. Kaelin's gaze held hers like a vow. That is not weakness. Eloin's hands trembled. It didn't matter. Kaelin's eyes narrowed, intensity rising. It matters to me, he said. The words were simple. But in them Eloin heard something terrifying. A promise of protection. A promise of respect. A promise she had never been given before. Eloin's chest tightened again, but this time, it wasn't only pain. It was fear of hope returning. Because hope was dangerous. Hope was how she ended up shattered in the cathedral. Elowen stepped back, shaking her head. I can't, she whispered. I can't be anyone's pawn again. Kaelin's expression sharpened. Then don't be, he said. Be your own. Elowen stared at him, confused. Caelin continued, voice firm. Come to Nithrosan lands and live. Learn. Decide who you are without the Black Veil Court telling you. Elowen's breath shook. You're saying, you'd let me walk away if I wanted? Caelin held her gaze. Yes. Elowen searched his face for deception. She found none. What she found was something more frightening. A man who meant what he said. A man powerful enough to destroy her, choosing instead to respect her choice. Elowen's knees felt weak again. She looked down at her dagger. At the small, battered thing her mother had given her. For the day kindness stops protecting you. Maybe this was that day. But maybe kindness could still protect her, if someone strong decided kindness was worth defending. Elowen lifted her gaze. What happens if I come with you? She asked quietly. Caelin's expression turned unreadable for a moment. Then he said the words that made Elowen's blood run cold. If you step into my lands, he said, the realm will assume you are mine. Elowen stiffened. Caelin immediately added, controlled and clear, not owned. Not forced. He tilted his head slightly. Claimed? The vampire word carried weight. A claim was protection. A claim was a declaration to every other predator. Touch her and die. But a claim also made her a target. Elowen swallowed hard. And Morvain? She whispered. Caelin's eyes darkened. The king will hear, he said. And it will burn him. Elowen's chest tightened, anger mixing with fear. I don't want to be used to hurt him, she said. Caelin's gaze sharpened with something like respect again. Then don't, he replied. Come for yourself. Not for revenge. Elowen stared at him. For the first time in her life, someone was offering her protection without demanding she shrink. Without demanding she beg. Without demanding she prove she deserved it. Elowen's fingers loosened around the dagger. Her shoulders sagged, not in defeat but in exhaustion. And she whispered, okay. Caelin didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He simply nodded once as if honoring a sacred decision. Then we leave now, he said. Before your court realizes what they've lost. Elowen's heart thudded. She rose slowly. Her legs trembled but she stood. Caelin turned away first, an old vampire gesture of trust, proving he would not attack. Elowen followed. Step by step. Into the unknown. Toward the rival lord's territory. Toward a claim that would shake the realm. And somewhere far behind them in the Black Veil Court, King Morvain Blackhill pressed a hand to his sternum, wincing as a strange ache flared in his chest. Not the bond. That was severed. So why did it feel like something was being taken from him? A servant entered his study, hesitant. My king, the servant said quietly, the Ashmeyer girl, she's gone. Morvain's eyes narrowed. Good. But the ache in his chest deepened. The servant swallowed. Lord Caelin Nithrosan has left his lands as well. Morvain's entire body went still. His voice turned dangerously calm. Repeat that. The servant whispered, people say, he followed her. Morvain didn't speak. His fingers curled into the desk hard enough to crack wood. Because suddenly, the humiliation he had given Elowen didn't feel like power. It felt like a mistake. And for the first time in 200 years, King Morvain Blackale felt something he had sworn he would never feel again. Jealousy. Not of love. Of ownership. Of fate. Of the fact that his rival might claim what he had rejected. The realm watches her rise. Elowen Ashmeyer crossed into Nithrosan territory at sunset. There was no ceremony. No horns. No kneeling servants lined along the road. And somehow that made it more terrifying. The land itself changed as they passed the boundary. The trees grew taller, their bark dark and smooth like polished obsidian. Pale luminescent moss traced the roots, glowing faintly as if responding to Caelin's presence. The air felt older here, heavier with magic but calmer as if the land didn't hunger for blood the way Nightridge did. Elowen slowed, instinctively wary. This place feels, she hesitated, searching for the word. Alive, Caelin finished quietly. Elowen nodded. Alive, but not cruel. Caelin glanced at her from the corner of his eye. You're safe here. The words landed strangely in her chest. Safe. She had never lived anywhere that claimed safety as a promise instead of a lie. They reached Caelin's stronghold after nightfall, a fortress carved into black stone cliffs overlooking a silver river. It wasn't adorned in gold or crimson banners. No excess. No vanity. Strength without spectacle. Eloin noticed the difference immediately. The guards at the gate straightened at Kaelin's approach, but when their eyes fell on Eloin, there was no sneer. No curiosity sharpened into mockery. Only acknowledgement. Respect. One of the guards bowed, not deeply, not submissively, but correctly. "Welcome to Nithrosen," he said. Eloin froze. No one had welcomed her anywhere since her parents died. Caelin noticed her stillness. He spoke softly. "They follow my example." Eloin swallowed. That scared her more than cruelty ever had. Inside the fortress, Caelin gave her a chamber overlooking the river. Simple but warm, with heavy curtains, a hearth already lit, and clean linens that smelled faintly of cedar. "I'll have food brought," Caelin said. "And clothes if you wish." Eloin nodded, still overwhelmed. He turned to leave. "Caelin," she said before she could stop herself. He paused. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Caelin considered her for a moment. "Now," he said, "you rest. Tomorrow the realm will start talking." He wasn't wrong. By dawn, whispers raced through the vampire territories faster than messengers. The Ashmeyer girl hadn't vanished into obscurity. She hadn't died on the road. She hadn't begged her way back into the Black Veil court. She had entered Nithrosen lands. Voluntarily. And Lord Caelin Nithrosen had not denied it. The rumors twisted as they spread. "She's his consort. She bewitched him." "No," he claimed her out of spite. "She's nothing but a pawn." But one detail silenced even the cruelest voices. Caelin had invoked the ancient right of acknowledgement. He hadn't bound Eloin. He hadn't branded her. He hadn't forced a claim. He had stood before his council and said only this: "She's under my protection. Harm her and you answer to me." No blood oath. No ownership. Just protection. The realm didn't know what to do with that. Eloin learned of this not through gossip, but through action. Servants addressed her politely, but never deferentially. No one touched her without permission. No one ordered her. No one mocked her faded gowns. And when a visiting noble sneered openly and asked Caelin why he was harboring discarded refuse, Caelin didn't raise his voice. He simply replied, "Choose your next words carefully." The noble paled. And apologized. To Eloin. She stood frozen, stunned as the vampire bowed to her. Something inside her shifted. Not triumph. Not arrogance. Awareness. Power did not always roar. Sometimes it stood quietly beside you and dared the world to test it. Days passed. Then weeks. Eloin slept without fear for the first time in years. She ate until she was full. She walked the fortress gardens freely, learning the land, the people, the rhythm of Nithrosen. Caelin never pressured her. Never touched her without consent. Never reminded her of the cathedral. But the bond Morvain had severed left echoes. Some nights, Eloin woke with her heart racing, feeling watched. Other nights, she dreamed of blood singing in a language she didn't know, but understood. And Caelin noticed. "You hear it too," he said one evening as they stood on the battlements, moonlight painting the river silver. Eloin stiffened. "Hear what?" "The old magic," Caelin said. "The kind that doesn't answer to kings." Eloin's fingers curled around the stone railing. "I thought the bond was gone." Caelin's gaze softened. "The bond Morvain severed was between you and him." Eloin turned slowly. "There are other kinds of bonds," Caelin continued. "Older. Rarer." Eloin's pulse quickened. "And you think I have one?" Caelin studied her carefully. "I think the realm underestimated you," he said. Again. The truth revealed itself one night by accident. A servant collapsed in the lower halls, blood poisoned by a curse meant for Caelin. Panic spread fast. Healers were summoned, but their magic failed. Eloin pushed through the crowd without thinking. "Move," she said. They stared at her. She didn't wait for permission. She knelt beside the servant, hands trembling, heart pounding. She didn't know why she did what she did. Only that something inside her knew. She pressed her palm to the servant's chest and whispered words she had never learned. Ancient syllables burned across her tongue. The air vibrated. The poison recoiled. The servant gasped, and lived. Silence fell. Caelin stared at her like the ground had shifted under his feet. "That language," one of the elders whispered. "That was the first tongue." Eloin staggered back, shaken. I don't know how." Caelin caught her before she fell. His grip was firm, but gentle. "You didn't learn it," he said quietly. "You remembered it." The realm reeled. The discarded Ashmeyer girl spoke the ancient language of blood and life. The same language used in the oldest rites. The same language only queens once knew. And in the Black Veil court, Morvain Blackale received the report. He read it once, twice, then crushed the parchment in his fist. She speaks the first tongue? He snarled. Yes, my king, his advisor whispered. She healed poison that should have killed. Morvain's chest burned. Memory slammed into him. Eloin's quiet strength, her refusal to beg, the way the bond had screamed when he severed it. Not weakness. Never weakness. Fate. And he had rejected it. Across the realm, Kaelin stood before Eloin, eyes intense. Not possessive, not hungry. But the realm will come for you now, he said. Not as a victim. Eloin lifted her chin, fear and resolve warring in her chest. As what? Kaelin answered honestly. As a queen. She shook her head. I don't want a throne. Kaelin's voice softened. Then you'll be more dangerous than anyone who does. Eloin looked out over Nithrosan lands, the river, the living land that had welcomed her. She wasn't invisible anymore. And this time, she wasn't alone. When the king began to fear. The first formal challenge arrived at Nithrosan wrapped in velvet and sealed in blood. Eloin was present when Kaelin broke the seal. She watched the crimson sigil dissolve into smoke, the words forming themselves in the air like a wound reopening. By order of the Black Veil throne, Eloin Ashmeyer is summoned to answer for the unauthorized use of first tongue rites. Failure to comply will be considered an act of provocation. Eloin's fingers tightened at her sides. So this is how it begins, she murmured. Kaelin's expression was calm, but his eyes were not. This is how it ends for them, he replied. He turned to her, studying her face, not to command but to ask. They want to see you kneel again, he said. They want to remind the realm that only kings decide worth. Eloin exhaled slowly. I won't kneel, she said. Kaelin nodded. Then neither will I. Word spread fast. The vampire king demanded Eloin's presence. Lord Kaelin Nithrosan refused. And the realm held its breath. Morvain Blackale paced the length of his war chamber, fury coiled tight in his chest. Reports littered the table. Testimonies, rumors, confirmations he did not want to believe. Eloin Ashmeyer had healed a poisoned servant. Eloin Ashmeyer spoke the first tongue. Eloin Ashmeyer walked openly beside Kaelin Nithrosan, unbowed, unclaimed, yet untouchable. Every name burned. But one truth burned worst of all. She had not broken. Morvain pressed his palm to his sternum, the old ache flaring again, sharp and accusatory. It was not the bond. It couldn't be. He had severed it. So why did it feel like something was calling him to her? You should never have rejected her, Corin said quietly from the shadows. Morvain snarled. Enough. Corin didn't flinch. You saw weakness because you feared what you could not control, Corin continued. And now the realm sees your mistake. Morvain's eyes darkened. She was nothing. Corin's voice cut sharp. No. She was unrecognized. The words echoed like judgment. Back in Nithrosan Eloin trained. Not with weapons. With knowledge. Kaelin brought her elders. Those who still remembered the old world before kings ruled by fear alone. They taught her the first tongue not as power but as responsibility. You don't command magic, one elder told her. You listen. Eloin listened. She learned that the language responded to intention, not dominance. That healing required humility. That strength without kindness turned magic toxic. And every lesson sharpened her resolve. She wasn't meant to rule through fear. She was meant to balance it. The second challenge arrived with less politeness. A Black Veil envoy crossed into Nithrosan lands without permission, insult in itself, and demanded Eloin's immediate return. Kaelin met him at the gate. Eloin stood beside him. The envoy sneered. You shelter stolen property. Kaelin's voice was mild. Choose your words. The envoy laughed. Or what? You'll start a war over a discarded girl? Silence fell. Eloin stepped forward. Her voice was steady. I am not discarded, she said. The air shifted. The first tongue stirred beneath her words, not spoken but present. The envoy's smile faltered. Eloin met his gaze. And I am not yours to summon. Kaelin didn't touch her. Didn't interrupt. He let her stand. The envoy left pale and shaken. The realm watched. And began to choose sides. Small houses, tired of fear, quietly aligned with Nithrosan. Healers sought Eloin's guidance. Servants whispered her name like a prayer. Morvain watched his power bleed, not through battle but belief. That terrified him more than war ever had. So he did the one thing left to him. Became himself. The Black Veil procession arrived at Nithrosin under banners of truce. Morvain Blackael stood at its head, perfect, cold, controlled. Eloin faced him across the courtyard. For a moment the world held still. He looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Not kneeling. Not trembling. Standing beside Kaelin as an equal. And something in Morvain cracked. "You should have come to me," he said. Eloin's eyes didn't soften. "You should have listened." The words hit harder than any spell. Morvain's jaw tightened. "I can correct my mistake." Kaelin's presence sharpened beside her. Eloin raised a hand slightly. She stepped forward alone. "You rejected me because I was inconvenient," she said calmly. "Because kindness embarrassed you." Morvain's voice dropped. "I was protecting the throne." Eloin nodded once. "And I was protecting my dignity." Silence spread like frost. Morvain looked at her, really looked, and for the first time he bowed his head. Just slightly. A crack in a king. "Come back," he said. "As my queen." The realm gasped. Kaelin went utterly still. Eloin felt the weight of the moment, but not temptation. She felt clarity. "No," she said. Not loud. Not cruel. Just final. Morvain's breath hitched. "You would choose him?" he demanded. Eloin met his gaze without fear. "I choose myself." The first tongue hummed in approval. Morvain stepped back as if struck. And in that moment the Vampire King understood something too late. Power taken by fear could be lost. But power built on respect could not be destroyed. The queen who chose herself. The war everyone expected never came. No armies marched. No blood-soaked fields followed. Because the realm changed before a single sword was drawn. After Morvain Blackael left Nithrosin, something irreversible fractured in the vampire world. Not loudly, not violently, but like ice breaking beneath still water. The Black Veil throne no longer felt absolute. And everyone knew why. Eloin Ashmeyer did not chase power. That was what made her unstoppable. She remained in Nithrosin, not as Kaelin's consort, not as a crowned queen, but as something the realm had not seen in centuries. A voice. The first tongue responded to her presence now without effort. When she walked through the lower cities, sickness eased. Old curses unraveled. Blood feuds quieted, not because she commanded them to stop, but because people listened when she spoke. She never shouted. She never threatened. She asked. And the realm, stunned, obeyed. Kaelin watched from the edges, protective but never possessive. "You could rule," he told her one night as they stood overlooking the Silver River. "They would follow you anywhere." Eloin's expression was calm. "I don't want subjects," she replied. "I want people who don't need to kneel." Kaelin smiled, not as a lord but as a man who finally understood what strength truly was. Morvain Blackael unraveled in silence. Alliances dissolved. Houses once loyal to fear withdrew their banners. Not because Eloin demanded it. Because Morvain's authority no longer felt justified. He had broken something sacred. And the realm remembered. When the final convocation was called, an emergency gathering forced by unrest, Eloin attended. Not summoned. Invited. She walked into the Cathedral of Blood again, wearing no crown, no jewels, no ancient gown. Only simple white and silver. The same hall. The same crimson marble. But this time the whispers were different. "That's her. She healed my sister. She ended the Thornwind curse. She speaks the old language like it was written for her." Morvain stood at the center, smaller somehow. And when Eloin stopped before him, he knelt. The sound echoed like thunder. "I was wrong," Morvain said, voice stripped of ceremony. "And I ask forgiveness." The realm froze. Eloin looked down at the man who had once erased her. And felt no hatred. Only resolve. "I don't need your forgiveness," she said gently. "I needed your respect." She turned, not to take his throne, but to break it. With the first tongue flowing through her, Eloin spoke a single ancient decree. Not destruction. Release. The Black Veil throne, built on dominance and fear, lost its binding magic. No more absolute rule. No more fate decided by cruelty. Kings would lead by consent. Or not at all. Morvain bowed his head. His reign ended not with blood, but with humility. The realm reorganized itself slowly after that. Kaelin never claimed Eloin. He walked beside her. Sometimes close. Sometimes distant. Always respecting her choice. And one night, beneath the silver moon, Eloin reached for his hand first. Not as queen. Not as symbol. But as a woman who had survived. "I choose you," she said softly. "Not because I need protection, but because I trust you." Kalen's voice was rough. Then I will walk with you. Always. They ruled nothing. And changed everything. The poor, invisible girl the vampire king once rejected became the measure by which power itself was judged. Not feared. Respected. And remembered.